Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, a senior writing coach at Defend and Publish, and this is podcast episode 1, doing a writing reset to kick off the new year. So, as part of Defend and Publish's new initiatives to support writers after and during the pandemic, we are doing a series of podcast episodes in January, one released every week, and they'll be focusing on how to get yourself back on track in a calm and collected manner instead of trying to panic and get started. So this week we will be starting with a writing reset, and I will be giving you just a couple of tips to get you going as we start round the corner for the new year. So one of the things to think about is just prior to the pandemic, and certainly, this has not even been a year, which is hard to believe, but prior to the pandemic, you may have had some writing habits in place. You might not have had the best habits in place, or you maybe just never got on track to something that was very regular. And certainly the pandemic disrupted that. So I know I have given some interviews about my regular writing habits, and one of those was writing in the library every weekday morning between 9 and 11 a.m. And I actually, there'll be a link in the show notes to this, but I describe what that writing process looks like during normal times on a podcast called Rhetoricity. So that was the way that I was working. And then in March, what ended up happening with me is that I had to do some writing from home, and I had never previously done that. I have 2 children at home. I have a spouse that's working at home. Everybody's on the internet. And especially for somebody like me that likes to go to my nice quiet library and then having craziness of, 3 Zooms or 4 Zooms going at one time, that wasn't really working for me, but I needed to find a way to make that work. And so there's some pictures of my pre-COVID writing space and a post-COVID writing space. If you want to check those out, those are also in the show notes. And I also described that in another webinar for Defend and Publish. So I'm pretty sure that one is in our writing project management webinar. If you want to check that out, that's something we're also offering free of charge during the month of January. So these are the 4 steps, just knowing that, we're sort of in this weird space where we know a vaccine is coming. We're not sure how soon things will get back to normal, but we probably can all be assured that the spring is not going to look like spring did prior to the pandemic and shelter in place orders. So these are some things I'm going to encourage you to think about as you are trying to reset your writing for the year. So the first one is just that it's time to let it go. So easy advice, maybe not so easy, but one of the nice things about a pandemic and everybody being all in this together is that everyone else is behind. And honestly, for most things, it really is not the end of the world that you are late on a project. So for example, I did not complete a book manuscript that I wanted to because I was homeschooling, and many of you might be doing that too. I just did not have the writing time that I used to have because I was schooling my children for 6 hours a day, and that might have been you as well. Others of you might be taking care of elderly relatives. You might have gotten COVID yourself and, lost weeks or even months to that. So knowing that is that everybody is behind. And so it's okay to let go of what you didn't do last year. I totally wanted to have this book that I was working on. I was all excited about it. I was ready to go. I had good writing habits. I was making great progress. And even for somebody like me that's motivated, I like to write. I don't have writer's block. I like to sit in the seat. It was still really tough. I did get some writing done, but not to the quantity that I wanted to. So I had to just let it go. And so that's really what I'm doing. I just established a new deadline for myself in the spring. And that really brings me to a second point. So if the first one is letting it go, understanding everybody is behind, and just letting go of what did not happen last year, you do have to think about a way for moving forward. And so that second way to move forward is really just to take stock of where you're at with all of your writing projects. So this could be a little bit scary, but I encourage you to get in your email and start looking around. What did you promise people? Did you promise to contribute an article or a chapter? Do you have maybe a draft of something you're supposed to get your dissertation advisor or to a colleague? So now's the time to just see where all those promises are and see if some of those things even matter anymore. So for example, for some things like conferences, a lot of conferences got canceled, some are in limbo, some got pushed back a year. Figure out what's happening with your major conference. You might be able to use what didn't happen last year again for this new conference. And in any case, if you've already written a great proposal, it was already accepted once and you're allowed to submit it again, I'd highly encourage you to do that as part of your taking stock of your projects, because you've already got the labor of that completed. Other things to look at would be, what are some projects that are overdue? You might know that you missed a deadline for something and you really need to just find out, what needs to happen with that. So taking stock is just getting everything together. I do describe in an Inside a Higher Education article about doing a master writing plan over the summer, where the summer's sort of getting away from you and you're not sure what you were doing. This is something that you can do also right now, is just to figure out what it is that you're doing. So there will be a link to that article in the show notes, because it does give you some steps as to how to decide what's important to work on. So that is certainly step number 2. So step 1 is letting go of what you didn't do. Step 2 is taking stock of what you need to do coming into the new year. The third one then would be picking a priority project. And so what a priority project would be, and this is also in this article that I referenced from Inside Higher Ed, but in short, you're looking at your giant list of everything that you're working on or supposed to be working on, and you're picking that priority project. So something like a dissertation would not be a priority project, but something like chapter 4 or your methods chapter, or rewriting your introduction, or writing, say, your table of contents. Maybe that's a mess and you've never combed through your whole dissertation to figure out all your subheadings and things like that. Those smaller bites are a priority project. So good priority projects are ones that you can prioritize really in like the first 6 weeks. So if we're thinking about, if this podcast is released the first week in January, this is something that you'd like to knock out by February 15th, maybe February 20th. But something that could be a priority project. So I will give you an example of what mine looks like. One of my last chapter that I have not written in a book that I'm working on, time management habits and time use diaries for academic mothers. There's one chapter I have that's all about what happens when you have administration on campus, and how does that affect you if you're a parent? How does that affect you with your time use habits? That chapter's been difficult for me to write just because there's so many different kinds of administration, and it's not my favorite one to write. So that was the chapter that I kept putting off and putting off, but I've decided that, that is my priority project. So just working on that single chapter. Other things that could be good priority projects would be things like, if you need to write your dissertation prospectus, that might be about the right size. If you have to think about how many pages a project might be, it's hard to say, but honestly, I would not pick something that's bigger than maybe 30 pages. You want something that's nice and realistic. And, if maybe your priority project is actually figuring out your abstract to your dissertation or a book or something like that, that can take a couple of weeks to do, and that's okay, because that's the thing that your whole project is hanging on. So that would be your next one, is that priority project. And then the last thing, or I guess, I should say related to your priority project, as part of that project, you really also need to figure out what are all the steps that just go with that singular priority project. So for me, I know I have lots of bits and pieces put in that chapter about administration, but none of them fit together. I know I need an anecdote to start off that chapter. I know I need to calculate some data from my time use diary collection, basically how many hours people are spending on administration. I have to do all that math. I know that I need to talk about 2 representative diaries. I know what those diaries are, but I haven't talked about them yet. So, I know several things I could be working on that chapter. I also know there's a book on administration that I need to cite that just came out. So those kinds of things, when I'm thinking of a priority project I'm working for those 6 weeks, I'm going to make a list of what those steps are. So maybe, or a list of tasks. I don't even want to call them steps, because I might do them in any order that works for me. But let's say there's 15 things that need to happen with that chapter. Once you get into that priority project, then it's a good point to make a list of things. So it's kind of like taking stock of all of your writing projects, where you're getting the bird's eye overview, but now you're just picking the one you're going to work on for this first 6 weeks of the semester. And so it's great to juggle multiple writing projects. That's actually more realistic, I think, for faculty life right now. But we've got to consider that many people haven't been writing for months, or not in a way that makes you happy, and it's been very stressful for you. So it's absolutely okay to pick one thing and just start working on and getting some forward momentum. So that really brings me to the last thing to work forward, is to think about easing into your writing. So, what I called this on my notes is scheduled but low pressure writing sessions. So let's talk about what those might look like. Here's what mine are going to look like, and this will be maybe give you some ideas. I know I have to work on that chapter 4. I haven't wanted to work on it in the 2 years I've been working on this book, so it sure isn't going to be very exciting for me to do that in January. But the way that I plan to do that is that first week, I have that list of things that I need to do with that project. The other thing that I'm going to do with those is I'm going to spend some time just rereading what I have. And I'm not even going to worry about having a pen with me or have my computer open. I'm just going to print it out and sit there with a cup of coffee. And that's going to be a writing session for me. So something like that might work for you, just to get yourself going in a way that you don't even have to try to force yourself to use fingers on the keyboard yet. Another thing that I'm going to do during that week is I want to actually talk to an administrator about my book. So I want to tell them about my time use diary data and say, well, if you're an administrator, what do you want to know out of this book? And I want to actually have a conversation, again, over coffee, because I love coffee, but this would be a way for me to find out what this chapter is supposed to be doing. So if you have an opportunity to have a conversation about what is the contribution that your writing is going to make, that's another really great low stakes way to get into your writing, where you're just talking to somebody about it. So it might be a dissertation advisor, it might be another grad student in the program where you guys take turns, where one person shares about their project and you share about yours, and then you guys brainstorm what are some major implications. It could be certainly a colleague or a co-author, but that's another way that I'm going to just start easing into that project, right? The other thing that I'm going to do in those first couple of weeks when I'm scheduling low pressure times, I am going to schedule times. So meaning, what are some hours I think I can realistically get some work done? So what I would recommend for anyone is to try to look for 8 to 10 hours a week. You probably need more. We all need more, but realistically, you may not get it. So, if you can get yourself 8 to 10 hours a week, that's very, I think that's very workable. It might be in slices. You might have to get up really, really early before kids or a partner gets up. I had to do that for a long time. That's how I got any writing done during the summer, is just to sort of bite the bullet and wake up at, 4 or 5 a.m. And that is not for everybody. It was definitely not for me. I was mean all day long. But, that might be what you have to do for a little while. See if you can just schedule in those times. And then once you do that, what you can do in these very low pressure sessions is just say, I have a priority project. I am working on it for the 6 weeks. I have all the time in the world. And hopefully that will calm down kind of the pressure to just jump out of the gate January 1st and just start writing because it's the new year. I think that's a possibility that a lot of people try to do, and it just doesn't play out very well because you can burn yourself out, and plus you're, going back to probably another very strange semester. So if you can just schedule in some time, 8 to 10 hours a week, if you can get it over the next 6 weeks, you put those hours wherever you want, and do as much as you can that might not even be writing where you're typing in the keyboard, but just getting reacquainted with your project, whatever your priority project is. So I know in this podcast interview that I mentioned before from Rhetoricity, one of the things I talk about is when I go in my writing sessions, I treat it kind of like I'm on a hot date at the library. I go get my cup of coffee and I'm really excited to go there. If you can find a way to do something similar for these very low contact, ease in low pressure sessions, that might be a way to move forward. So our next podcast episode, if you're looking forward to hearing the next one next Monday, will really focus more on that priority project and what to do in those priority writing sessions. I gave you some ideas in case you're getting, right off the ground and say you want to schedule 8 hours in this very first week, but I'll have lots of ideas for you in the second episode, and I look forward to talking with you then. So happy writing.